Peace, Facebook family. I want to take a few minutes this afternoon to talk about the history of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, two of the giants of black nationalism in America. And it's a very important subject, and in doing so, my intent is not to reopen old wounds, but just to give some basic history as I know it, and to give some perspective on the history, because there is still division among black people, supporters of Malcolm and supporters of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And there's still some tension there. You know, you see things on Facebook, people going back and forth still. It's like 50 years plus since Malcolm was assassinated, and people still going back and forth, and they feel very strongly about Malcolm's history. So I decided, and I've been contemplating this video for a while, and one of the things that prompted me to do it is one of the men who, an uncharged assassin of Malcolm, passed away about a month ago. So I decided I was going to do it. And so we all know, or should know, the basic history of Malcolm. Malcolm was a street person involved in criminal activity, and he wound up in prison in Massachusetts. And like a lot of people, he became introduced to the teachings while he was in prison. And he began to actually correspond with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad while he was in prison. And Mr. Muhammad, responded and was sending money, and, he was teaching on him through the mail. And of course, they had a small group of brothers in the prison as well. This was in Massachusetts, so this was like in the early 50s. Eventually, when Malcolm got out, he went and visited the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, met him, and Malcolm joined the nation. And Mr. Muhammad signed, since Malcolm was from Boston, so Malcolm was attending the temple in Boston. Eventually, Malcolm, he rose through the ranks, and he became the minister of the temple in Boston. And essentially, Malcolm became the protege of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Mr. Muhammad was Malcolm's mentor, and Malcolm started ascending through the ranks. And so it's easy to see how the teachings, what Mr. Muhammad was teaching his protege, activated the latent qualities that Malcolm had of being a great speaker, organizer, debater, and a great thinker. So Malcolm, after he was the minister of the Boston Temple for a while, Mr. Muhammad transferred him to Temple Number 7 in New York. And of course, that's a very important position, New York being the preeminent city in the world. And after that, Mr. Muhammad appointed Malcolm to be his national representative. And that's like arguably at that time the second most important position in the nation after Mr. Muhammad himself. So Malcolm again rose through the ranks, and he had gained national and international fame. And Malcolm's influence and his abilities were so pronounced, so stark, that a lot of people in the nation wanted the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to step down and have Malcolm succeed him. Now, Mr. Muhammad, of course, didn't do that, but that was the feeling in the nation. So essentially, Malcolm had a lot of support in the nation. And that should be noted and understood. Malcolm was very popular in the nation. In the general nation, the rank and file, as well as the inner circle of the nation. Among, some of the top people in the nation, Malcolm was very popular, and he had a lot of support in the nation. Now, there was some tension. It wasn't serious tension, but there was some tension between the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm. Number one, because a lot of people wanted wanted Mr. Muhammad to step down and have Malcolm replace him. And also, Malcolm wanted the nation to have a more militant, overt response to physical attacks by white people against black people and the nation. And Mr. Muhammad rejected that idea. He didn't want an overt response to physical attacks because he said that we black people were not prepared to engage in open warfare with white people, essentially. So Mr. Muhammad called this idea of Malcolm bloodbath teachings. Now, the tension between the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm came to a head in November 22nd, 1963, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. So because there was great love for JFK, John F. Kennedy, among white people, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told his ministers not to make any public statements about the assassination. Malcolm, however, disobeyed that order and made the famous chickens coming home to roost statement. And he made a public comment about the assassination. And among other things, he said that the assassination was just another example of the chickens coming home to roost, how white people deal with their problems or disagreements. They go to the gun. This is their nature, violence. So because Malcolm disobeyed that order, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad suspended Malcolm for 90 days. And in the nation, that is known, when a minister is suspended or got suspended, is known as minister got sat down. And, being suspended in the Nation of Islam is nothing extraordinary. From time to time, if you break some rules or whatever, you can get suspended for a certain amount of time. And, the severity or the length of time that you suspended is based on the severity of the infraction. So Mr. Muhammad suspended Malcolm for 90 days. So Malcolm apparently didn't like it, and he decided to leave the nation. Now all this started being played out in public. So Malcolm publicly announced that he was leaving the nation. And this caused a big explosion, a big uproar, because, especially with the media, because now this was an opportunity for white people to they saw an opening, a rift, a disagreement. So of course, this is what they do. They immediately got involved and start, giving this big media attention, big coverage. They got a split in the Nation of Islam, and it played very well in the press. And so they covered every aspect of the disagreement between the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm. So Mr. Muhammad and Malcolm had a war of words, and they were going back and forth. Now, when Malcolm left and leaving the nation, Malcolm took a lot of people with him. He took all the strength out of Temple number 7 in New York. And he also took Mr. Muhammad's 2 sons with him, Wallace and Akbar, and maybe a few other family members of Mr. Muhammad as well. So it was very serious. And going back and forth, so Mr. Muhammad and Malcolm were having this war of words, and it was getting serious. So Malcolm decided to reveal to the public that Mr. Muhammad had more than one wife, that he was practicing polygamy. But he didn't frame it as Mr. Muhammad was practicing polygamy. Malcolm said that Mr. Muhammad had mistresses and illegitimate children. And of course, this set off another firestorm, serious, because the inner circle knew that Mr. Muhammad had more than one wife, but the general public and the rank and file of the nation didn't know that. So this came as a huge surprise, and it was a big thing. It was huge, and of course, at that time, polygamy is no one understood that. Mr. Muhammad, was viewed rightly so as a religious man, and now it's coming out that he's got children by different women. And again, Malcolm didn't frame it as Mr. Muhammad was practicing polygamy. Polygamy is the practice of a man having more than one wife. And in terms of Mr. Muhammad, to my knowledge, Mr. Muhammad has 7 wives altogether, and he had 21 children. And this was based on, Mr. Muhammad's actions were based on Prophet Muhammad's history, the Arabian prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah 1400 years ago, who had a total of 9 wives, and he practiced polygamy. So that's what Mr. Muhammad's actions were based on. In any event, this caused a big uproar within the nation itself that Mr. Muhammad was practicing polygamy, and it was a serious thing. Now, another thing that happened in the rift between Malcolm and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is that Malcolm made a pilgrimage to Mecca, Arabia. So, in doing so, he sent back word that, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't tell us that they are white Muslims. And this caused another big uproar. Now, all this was in the span of a few months, because remember that Malcolm was suspended in November 1963. And he was assassinated on February 21st, 1965. So basically, within, 15 months, that all this took place. So Malcolm went to Mecca and said that, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't teach us they're white Muslims. Now, if we should all understand, number one, is that the Islam that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us is different from the Islam that they have in the East, that Prophet Muhammad taught 1,400 years ago. That should be understood. And number two is that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that the black man is Muslim by nature, meaning that we are descendants from Allah himself, the Creator, and that the white man is not a descendant of the Creator Allah. His existence or being came about through other means, and that he is only Muslim by faith, whereas again the black man is Muslim by nature. And also it should be understood that wasn't, when Malcolm went to Mecca in 1964, that wasn't the first time that Malcolm had been there. Malcolm had actually went there in 1959, I believe. He had made an earlier trip to the East. And we have to understand that Malcolm knew that they were white Muslims in Islam. So that should be understood. In any event, to this day, when you talk about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm, one of the first things that people say is that, Elijah didn't teach him or us that they were white Muslims. And again, that's, the basis of the teachings is that the black man is Muslim by nature, and that white people, or the white man, is Muslim by faith. So we should definitely have some understanding on that and some knowledge on that. Now, in Malcolm going to Mecca, he also embraced Sunni Islam, or he took his Shahada and became Sunni Muslim or Orthodox Muslim. And by Sunni Muslim, I mean that word is derived from Sunnah. Sunnah is the practice of Prophet Muhammad. So the practice of Prophet Muhammad means that the way Prophet Muhammad lived his daily life, his followers who follow the Sunnah or tradition of Prophet Muhammad, they try to do everything the way Prophet Muhammad did it 1,400 years ago. There's books on how Prophet Muhammad conducted his life, which are known as hadiths. And in these books, among other things, they say, how Prophet Muhammad treated his wives, or how he prayed, and things of that nature. So that's where the term Sunni Muslim comes from. So Malcolm became a Sunni Muslim, and he denounced the Islam as taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So Malcolm introduced the black man and woman here in America to Sunni or Orthodox Islam. And when you see, which I'll get into in a few minutes more, but when you see our brothers and sisters who are following the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, that really all stemmed from Malcolm. And to take it a step further in terms of Malcolm's militancy by any means necessary doctrine, if you will, the Panthers and the BLA after them really are the spiritual children of Malcolm, because Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, and Eldridge Cleaver, in the inner circle of the Panthers, they all identified with Malcolm. Malcolm was, again, like their spiritual leader. And they are, the Panthers were based on essentially by any means necessary doctrine. And that, this is one of the reasons why they carried weapons and things of that nature. So that's also to be understood. So again, Malcolm is like the spiritual father of the Panthers and the BLA and, black militancy in general. Now, prior to Malcolm being assassinated, Malcolm wanted to return to the nation. And I think that's very instructive about Malcolm's mindset, that notwithstanding all the rhetoric, if you will, or going back and forth between him and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, ultimately, near the end, he wanted to come back to the nation. And, that speaks volumes. And we should recognize that and, consider that. Also, I just want to go back for a minute in terms of Orthodox or Sunni Islam. It also, in terms of Malcolm introducing us black people here in America to Orthodox or Sunni Islam, Malcolm highly influenced the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's son, Wallace, or Warif Muhammad, who succeeded Elijah after Mr. Muhammad left in 1975. He was succeeded by his son, Wallace, or Warif Imam Warif Muhammad. And in a lot of respects, Wallace or Warif was a protege of Malcolm. And because, as I said a few minutes ago, when Malcolm left the nation, Warif or Wallace at that time left with him. This is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's son, went and followed Malcolm out the nation. He eventually came back after Malcolm's assassination, but nonetheless, he never relented or relinquished his idea that Malcolm was right. And when Mr. Muhammad left us or passed away, he took the nation into Orthodox or Sunni Islam. So that's a very key thing to understand as to really how Orthodox or Sunni Islam evolved and became as popular as it is among black people here in the wilderness of North America today. Now, in terms of our people really not knowing what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught, I would say that a lot of people are actually feeling what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught, or big on the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and don't even know it through Malcolm's teachings and preachings that you find in numerous videos around. People are actually believing and feeling what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us through Malcolm, which is a serious irony. Because most of what's out there on Malcolm, the spoken word, is when he was in the nation. And when Malcolm was in the nation, he was the best teacher and explainer of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So that's something to be considered as well. So if you don't know the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and you've been studying what Malcolm taught, basically most of what's out there by Malcolm is when he was in the nation, when he was a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So that's something that, that we should really consider. And again, to recognize that, Malcolm was the protege of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And in closing this video, I just want to emphasize that we're making the video to just heal the wounds, or just to get some understanding, to broaden our perspective on who our heroes are and who the giants are here in America among black people. And that, we should never let the enemy or white people choose our heroes for us. And we should, have knowledge, and we should be conversing about people like Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, and Malcolm. And so we can move forward and we can educate our children on these things. Because again, look, white people are never going to teach us our true history, nor are they going to teach us anyone that's against their interests, or teach us about anyone that's against their interests. Integration doesn't serve us well. The reality is that the political process really doesn't serve us well. We can use it, to our advantage, but ultimately it's not going to really solve our problems. And we have to solve our problems ourselves, and we have to think outside the box. We can't think within this narrow framework, of the so-called American dream, because we know the American dream is not working for us. So I just want to, again, say, look, let's learn our history. Let's learn as much history as we can about the giants, or the people that had great influence on us. I mean, if we into any kind of the upliftment or betterment of black people, or we care about black issues, you can't ignore the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You can't ignore Garvey, and you can't ignore Malcolm on the other side. Malcolm is a hero to our people, so we have to accept that for those on the other side. And so we should be able to, work within that framework if necessary. And so, again, this video is not about causing division. And in closing, I just want to say, whenever people talk about Malcolm, they talk about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, whatever side of the fence they fall on, is, look, both of these men came and did some serious work. Some missteps was made along the way, nonetheless, or of course hindsight is 20/20, and I'm just speaking objectively and in general. But both these men came and did their work, and we left behind now. We're after them, and we can't spend our time bickering or going back and forth with each other about who was right and who was wrong, because this detracts or takes away from the things that we should be doing and continuing the work of the upliftment and betterment of our people. And we have to always recognize that we can't be sidetracked over these old arguments. These arguments, where there are arguments, of course, everyone is not involved in bickering and quarreling about Malcolm and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but there are people and places where, this can get quite heated and pronounced. Again, both these men came and did their work. So what kind of work are we doing? Oh, and one thing I wanted to add as well is that, of course, we should all know that Minister Farrakhan was a protege of Malcolm X. We should also understand that as well. Minister Farrakhan attended the temple in Boston when Malcolm was a minister in Boston. And again, Malcolm was big in the nation, and, he was a great teacher. He was a great leader in his own right. So Minister Farrakhan was the protege of Malcolm. Malcolm was Minister Farrakhan's mentor, and which is, very interesting sidebar in itself. And when Malcolm left the nation, Minister Farrakhan, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, assigned Minister Farrakhan to number 7. That's how Minister Farrakhan got to number 7, and that's how put him on the road to national and international celebrity or fame, if you will, in the teachings. And I just want to say, too, just to back up, so many little tidbits I just wanted to get out. You know, when Malcolm left the nation, when he left number 7, he took all the strength out of number 7 with him. So when Minister Farrakhan came to New York, you know, he had to rebuild the temple. So, you know, he rebuilt temple number 7. And so all this history is important, and we should know it and we should understand it, and not be in dark or ignorant about, you know, something that's, you know, really happened a very short time ago, and concerns us all, because it's all about the upliftment and betterment of black people. So with that, I'm going to close the video. Peace.